what is your pathway if you do have a vaccine injury or death?
We fight against a little law firm called the Department of Justice. You might have heard of them. They got all our money, and they deploy it. There's only one product in America you cannot sue on the basis that had you made it safer, my kid wouldn't have died, my kid would have been injured. And that is, they had a clinical trial. For the data they did have, you would assume more people died in the placebo group than the vaccinated group. But you remember when they said it was 95% effective? Do you know what they based that on? The safety is never validated before they're licensed because they don't have the economic incentive. It's a federal government program that guarantees payments for the pharma companies. If somebody can't pay, they pay for it. I believe it'd be about $8 billion this year going to go to the pharma companies just to pay them for vaccines. Think about it. It's an amazing business model. Guaranteed market because of mandates. Free marketing, government promotes it. No liability, and the guaranteed payment. Exactly. It's not about suffering. It's not about life years lost. It's about what will we have to pay and when. It's a product that causes such a level of harm that it cannot exist without the federal government giving immunity to liability for the injuries that it causes.
I feel like we were having like a very interesting conversation about the government and how it all works, and I feel like that plays really well into the book and the laws that exist that put Americans in a compromised position, or in a position, as the title would say, Vaccines Amen, to sort of follow along blindly with blind faith that they should trust whatever comes out from the government or someone like that. So I think I'd love to like go back to the government, because we were just here like jiving about how, you know, everybody's asking for people, certain people to get into politics. I'm one of them, you're one of them. And like, what is fundamentally, you think, the problem with the way that the government works that would lead into so many issues that we find?
At this point, the federal government's gotten way too big. I mean, sprawlingly big. And the thing about government is their normal solution is, we're going to tell you how to live your life. It really is, right? I mean, that's what laws are. That's what regulations are. We were just talking about how many federal government employees are there.
Yeah, I was blown away. I mean, I thought that when Trump got elected, I feel like I had heard something like he has to fill like 14,000 positions or something like that. So you were asking me how many employees are in the government, and I said 14,000.
Right.
And I was a little off.
I was a little off. It's about 2.8 million. 2.8 million federal government employees. That's just the employees. And it's multiples of that when you add in the contractors, those that are paid by the government, and businesses and so forth that surround the government. So it's sprawling. And then when you think about, you know, Congress, right, you think of laws being passed by Congress. You're like, oh, that they passed the laws, right? It's Article 1 of our Constitution created Congress to pass the laws. You know how many laws Congress passes a year on average?
God, I bet very little. I bet 1 or 2. I don't know.
Well, it's like 100 or 200 on average, but
how many are submitted in the year?
There's a lot of bills.
Because there's voting. Like, I've kind of seen a little bit more of government. There's like, oh, we've got to go in and do your vote and do your thing, and that happens all the time when they're in session, because those sessions also go in cycles too, right?
It shouldn't be this way. The federal Congress is in session almost all year round at this point. I mean, effectively, almost. They're in session a lot, unlike a lot of state legislatures that are really only in session a few months out of the year, which is what it should be. The other thing is that a lot of times when you look at Congress, they're often focusing on passing laws. How often do you hear them talk about repealing laws? That's Congress. That's Article 1. Now, separately, Article 2 of the Constitution created an executive branch that's supposed to implement the laws. But you've heard of something called regulations, I'm sure. There's statutes passed by Congress, and then there are regulations that are passed, adopted, whatever you want to call it, by regulatory agencies, whether it's the SEC, go down the list of the alphabet soup of agencies, which, by the way, there's a great report. They can't even figure out exactly how many agencies they have. There's so many. I'm not kidding. There's so many agencies, okay?
Well, Elon Musk is back in, so maybe Doge will reboot.
Well, they got a lot of work to do. And each of these agencies pass regulations. Those regulations have the same force and effect as a statute passed by Congress. In my opinion, that's unconstitutional. But I'm not the...
And those aren't the ones coming through Congress. You're saying they're just separate.
That's right.
These are just regulations, and these are laws.
That's right. But if you go violate a law, if you go violate a statute, or you violate a regulation, you violated the law. the law. They're both considered the law. You can go to jail. You could have a civil penalty. You could have your business shut down. You name it, right? It doesn't. Most people don't distinguish between them. Certainly, at the end result is not any different, but they both carry the same force and effect of law. We said around 100 to 200 statutes passed by Congress every year. Guess how many regulations are passed by unelected bureaucrats every year?
This will be frightening.
Thousands.
Oh my God.
Thousands and thousands. And who are these unelected bureaucrats?
Like, what are examples of some ridiculous regulations?
In terms of ridiculous regulations, just go and read the entire regulatory code from basically, I would say most agencies. I mean that, and I'll tell you why. Because it's not about how silly any particular regulation is, and there are some silly ones about out there. It's about the impact on your life, seriously, and about your rights. You think about, I mean, most people think about laws that's there to protect them, and that's true to a degree.
Right.
But they also are restricting your ability to do something. How's it protecting you? It's often saying you can't do this, you can't do that, right? So you want to make sure that those who pass those laws have your interests in mind.
Right.
But these agencies, they often start out as good ideas. They always typically come from a crisis, but over time, who's got the money, the time, and the inclination to influence them? You and me?
Right.
The public? No. It's the very industry typically that they're there to regulate.
Well, the first thing that came to mind when I started thinking about something like this just earlier today, I was like, oh, wait a second. So if the 1986 Act that didn't give any financial danger to the pharmaceutical companies anymore for vaccine injuries, I was like, wait, they were probably the ones funding all these campaigns. So is that how that even happened? I mean, because that's obviously exactly what we're talking about, what you're talking about in this book, and what plays such a huge role with this whole vaccine controversy, drama, trauma, and ultimately death in some scenarios. So is that just it's a very generalized way of looking at it, but is it basically these pharmaceutical companies buying off their way to keep themselves protected in just one more way, whether it's selling or protecting themselves from lawsuits in the future?
Well, the 1986 Act, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, is a creature of statute, meaning it was passed by Congress.
Okay.
So that's a statute. But all of the regulations that have been adopted pursuant to that statute have been adopted by the agencies, the FDA, the CDC, the NIH, HHS. And in those instances, yes, bought off, strong, right? It's not a direct like, hey, we're here with a bag of money.
But you're a lawyer, so you do have to find those pathways.
But it's.
Are you only able to sue the FDA then if you have a problem? What is your pathway if you do have a vaccine injury or death? What do you do if you feel like you want to do something about it?
Well, if you're injured by a vaccine, most vaccines, you sue the Secretary of HHS. You can bring a claim, but you're not suing the pharma companies.
Right.
You're suing the very government department that tells you vaccines are safe and effective.
Right.
So it's not even a court, it's a specialized program effectively called the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. You don't get an Article 3 judge, meaning an article that's a judge that's been appointed by the president and so forth. You get a special master. There's no discovery as of right. You cannot you typically can't do any document requests. You can't depose the other side, which is typically the way that you
get
prove
information.
A drug caused the injury. But yet in most cases, you, the petitioner, have to actually prove causation. Right? So you have to prove it, but you get your hands tied behind your back. And then the petitioner attorneys, like my firm that brings these claims, we fight against a little law firm called the Department of Justice. You might have heard of them. They got all our money, and they deploy it. They go and take our tax dollars to hire a cadre of experts, to make an army of lawyers to fight who? Against everyday families whose kids been injured. It's the only product that I know of where the government protects the interests of the industry against the injured consumers and injured kids in this country.
how often is there a settlement, and are there any notable settlements that have come from this pathway for any regular American that went after some sort of settlement for an injury?
The program has paid out over $5 billion to date. And there's a cap of $250,000 for pain and suffering and a cap of $250,000 for death. So, yes.
So that's the max that anyone's going to get as a settlement.
Absolutely. And for those two types of injuries, which are the primary, pain and suffering is the primary way you typically get compensation. Hold companies accountable for what they do wrong. Now, I would also say that the injuries that you can get compensated for are limited. I often think of it as a policy program. It's not like, if you went into a typical court with a jury of your peers, you had full discovery, you're going to get a very different outcome. You might get actual real compensation. Here, it's the opposite. You got a program where you don't get a jury of your peers. You get special masters who are, not all of them, but many of them are very focused on trying to protect the vaccine program. So they want to limit the number of injuries that are recognized, and they have a systematic way of doing it. Like right now, there's one special master who's decided there's a certain injury that they want to kind of get out of the program. So, constantly ruling against that injury, type of injury. It's totally inappropriate. And then the DOJ used delay as a tactic. So let's say you call me up, my firm. You have a simple injury. Let's just say you have your bursa exploded because, it caused inflammation in your arm. So kind of a standard injury from a vaccine. I'm not even getting to complex ones like neuropathies or Guillain-Barré syndrome that cause paralysis. Now you're a truck driver, so you can't drive a truck. And then you actually feed your family. Contact our firm. We'll say, yeah, we can file a claim for you in the vaccine compensation program. But first you have to wait 6 months because your injury has to last 6 months unless you got surgery. But I can't drive a truck.
For them to say it's bad enough.
Right. So it needs to meet the severity requirement. Now, if this was any other injury, we file a letter immediately. We probably get insurance coverage, the hospital, and we get you compensated, and it'd be a very different situation. 6 months pass. Now, we still can't file the petition. We have to now go and gather at least 3 years of your medical records. All of them. Doesn't matter. Anything. You went to podiatrist, whatever. Get all your medical records for 3 years. So they get all of that. Once we finally get all of that.
So we're 3.5 years in.
Well, we're 6 months. We get all the records.
Or you have to go back 3 years.
You have to go back 3 years.
Yeah.
So you got to request it. And you know how much doctors and medical providers love giving medical records to lawyers.
Yeah, it's impossible. You can't even get your own.
It's immediate. They
unless you get in the
portal. Please take
them.
And we even say in the letter, we will not sue you. We can't sue you. So just give us the records. We get that. That takes a few months. We're pretty efficient about it. We file the petition. Now, if I was suing the government in any other context or suing any other party, you get 30 to 60 days to respond. Never heard of a defendant that gets longer than that, except in this program. DOJ often gets 9 months to a year to just respond to the filing. I'm not kidding.
And now you, as a regular American that has been affected negatively, you are now paying lawyers' fees consistently, right? Or are these provided for you, or is this all on your own dollar?
No, we do this all on our own dollar. So this program actually also tries to avoid lawyers bringing claims because, one, you're not allowed to take money from clients. You're not allowed to under the statute. So we can't charge anything hourly. We can't even take a percentage. The only thing the lawyers get is at the very, very end of the case, when it's all said and done, we can submit our hours and it's like the worst statutory rates in the whole system. And that process also can often we have fee petitions where the case took years and then we filed for our fees and we've been waiting over a year. It's very effective at avoiding lawyers from bringing these, which is why there aren't a lot of firms that do this work. If you want to get rich and you're a lawyer out there, don't do this work. It's not going to happen. In fact, you're most likely going to lose money. Okay, put that part of it aside. You got this poor trucker now. It's about 1 year and 9 months in, and he's finally gotten a response from DOJ. Now we're just getting started. Now the question is, if it's on table or if it's depending on which route it goes, you could end up going down the expert route or not. The DOJ will then finally maybe make you an offer. And it's always ridiculous. It's always laughable, but they pretend like they're going to do it in good faith. And when they go through that process, Then they pause the litigation, basically, as if there's much to happen, because despite getting all of my clients' medical records, so they could go hire some medical experts to try to put holes in it, we can't get any discovery. I can't get any, depositions, you name it. They then engage in this long drawn-out process where the goal effectively is to dry out the petitioner, so they just will accept the lowball offer.
Of course.
I've seen folks
you don't want to wait for a response. Could take another 9 to 12 months.
Yeah, and if it's anything other than a standard like cervical injury, shoulder injury, or one of the like very narrow standard ones, forget it. You're in years and years of this goes on, and they just wait. They just dry the petitioner out.
Oh my God.
I've seen folks with devastating injuries finally just capitulate because they're just like, I'll just take it. I can't do this anymore.
Cut your losses and your emotional loss too. I mean, when you're in any kind of lawsuit or suing situation that involves a lawyer, that stuff is very draining.
Yeah, I recommend people stay away from lawyers. I highly recommend it. It's good for your health. It really is. It is. It's sad too, because the whole point of this program was you gave up your right to discovery. You gave up your right to a jury. You gave up your right to a whole host of things you would normally get. And what were you supposed to get in return under this program? Speedy, fair compensation. It's the opposite that's happened. It's the reason, we'll go back to where we started, why government, when it gets involved, it totally doesn't end up for the better of the average citizen. It's not the way it goes.
So many different examples of this within the government, whether it's immigration or anything. It just seems like obviously it just takes forever, and the government's so big. And is there any sort of easily observational solution to this at all, or is this is kind of one of the things I feel like I'm finding out with government too? Is it's like, wow, it's complicated, and it's almost so far gone. Things are almost so far gone.
We need to reduce the size of government at the federal level drastically. I mean, by an incredible amount. Let's just look at the Department of Health and Human Services, right? The Secretary Kennedy's running right now. It's got over 65,000 employees.
Didn't he fire a whole bunch as soon as he got there too?
Yeah, that's down from 85,000. Fired or left. They're still at 65,000.
Right.
65,000. So, as you and I sit here and talk, we probably have dozens of lawsuits right now pending against those federal health agencies, often seeking just basic information from them, right? Documents, internal emails, and so forth through the Freedom of Information Act. And we've also gotten over the years millions of pages of internal records from these agencies. And I could tell you, between looking at all of those, litigating with them, interacting with them, I do not know what those 65,000 people in large part do. When there's actually something significant to do, they often just outsource it anyway.
Government contracts, other agencies, other groups.
And when they do engage in decision making, it's mercurial. You're not sure what it is. I think that that 65,000 should be reduced to a tiny fraction of it, and whoever you retain should be paid 4 or 5 times as much, meaning they should be paid more than industry. Because the problem is that they're paid so much less than the equivalent job in industry.
Oh yeah.
They want that industry job. It's not even conscious. It's not nefarious. It's just human. And so they know that, there are lines that they cross, they'll never end up in that position. Look at like Julie Gerberding, who used to run the CDC, okay, during a period of incredible controversy around a number of Merck vaccine products. She was a CDC director, shepherded the CDC quite nicely for the Merck, rewarded with being the head of their vaccine division and then eventually promoted, has made incredible amounts of money.
Oh, well, I mean, honestly, you said that and I'm like, oh, wow, that sounds like racing, where we would think about like cheating, trying to get away with stuff, getting through things through tech, trying to look at the gray areas of the rule book to try and find ways to get more speed out of the car. And like I always said, is like, until the most expensive, highly paid employees are the ones working for the series to try and catch it, you'll always be behind. Because all the best people are getting paid the most amount of money to go to the teams to go figure these things out. They're always 2 steps ahead, man. Like, they're the most brilliant minds and they're ahead of the curve. And the people within the organization don't really know what's going on until it's been too far gone. And so that makes perfect sense, that the highest paid employees should be the ones that are overseeing.
If you're going to give the imprimatur of the federal government on a product, you're going to say this has been licensed by the federal government of the United States, you better be really certain that it meets whatever standard you're claiming it is safe and effective, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Right. Well, I mean, that comes to a question like, how do you decide that? And where are the lines that you cross between like general public health versus individual autonomy, my body, my choice, which ironically has totally been the one that the left did not support in the end. It's like, how do you make that decision of what should be approved and what's not, what's safe and what's not?
Well, I view the question of approving a product and whether you have bodily autonomy is totally distinct.
Fair.
I would say that whether you approve it or not, we could talk about those standards.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the question of whether there should be bodily autonomy, I don't think there's any question. They should always have the right to make your own choice,
mm-hmm.
period.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to persuade folks on the merits, and if they don't want something, a medical product, they shouldn't have
mm-hmm.
to get it, period. I mean, that would be consistent with civil and individual rights.
Right, but they would say outbreaks, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Outbreaks, right? Keep your 6 foot distance, you know? Don't go outside, all the things that they were trying to say to flatten the curve. If I ever hear flatten the curve ever in my life, I'm just going to puke, because that clearly didn't work. But that would be what the argument would be. Would they, like,
and I would say
any
to
of
those,
these diseases, that it would be an outbreak?
And I would say to those folks, I will fight for everybody's right who wants a vaccine or wants a therapeutic or wants to wear a mask. I'll fight for your right to be able to do it. The government shouldn't tell you you can't.
Right.
You want to take 6 vaccines every day and wear 40 masks and live in your basement? It's America. That's freedom. I'll fight for your right to do it.
Yeah.
Who's stopping you? Go do it.
Well, how about the information being available then? You know, I know you've stated that it's all there. Like, if you go look on the CDC website or anywhere to find the information about vaccines in particular, but probably many more things, that it's there. Is it easy to find? Is it easy to actually be your own investigator and have that autonomy and make a decision for yourself?
I think it is. I mean,
you're really smart though. So
well, I'll make it very simple. I mean, look, I
need a children's book level for me.
I mean, when you think about deciding whether a vaccine is safe and effective, in particular safety, because first you want to do no harm, it's not about how long it takes to develop the product, because that technology started with the invention of the wheel,
sure.
ages and ages ago, okay?
Sure.
It's not about that. It's about what did the results show in the clinical trial that tested in human beings. So everybody talked about the COVID vaccine, it was rushed. They said, oh, it was a rushed vaccine. Not sure what that, personally, I genuinely don't know what that means, and I'll tell you why. The technology developed, the COVID vaccine, started long before COVID came out.
Right.
Fauci's vaccine center in NIAID, in the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, he had a vaccine group, had been developing an mRNA vaccine for SARS-CoV-1. They'd already been working with Moderna to do that for a while. That technology was there. You know, and the technology about the lipid nanoparticle and all that had been developed over decades. That's not a way to judge whether or not the product is safe or not.
Mm-hmm.
You judge it when you have a clinical trial in human beings and you compare a group that gets it
mm-hmm.
with a group that doesn't.
And they didn't do that.
Well, they did do that for COVID vaccine, actually, in the clinical trial. They had a clinical trial. Now, the question is, what did it
show?
How well was it designed, and what did it show? So the COVID vaccine trial.
I think all the rats died, right?
What's that? Well,
I think all the rats died.
The animals didn't fare so well.
Yeah.
But let's talk about mortality. I don't want to bore any folks with data, but in Pfizer's trial, for example, they had about 30,000 individuals in the 16-plus-year-old trial. Half of them got the vaccine, about half didn't, and they got a placebo. It's actually one of the rare instances where there was a placebo control group, so wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So you could actually compare it. Now, most drug trials, there would be multi-year placebo-controlled trials. Why? Because at the end of a few years, you would take the group that got the drug, the group that got a placebo, like a saline injection, and you would compare. What are the rates of cardiovascular issues, neurological issues, immunological issues? You go down the list. Cancer. And you can see, okay, how safe is it really?
Sudden death became a new thing in America.
Well, that's a whole other issue.
A new disease.
Anyways, I'll get to the bottom. I'll get to the end of that quick. But with Pfizer's, half of them got the vaccine, half placebo. They did, as you know, after 2 months on average, vaccinated all the placebo group. But let's leave that aside too. But for the data they did have, you would assume more people died in the placebo group than the vaccinated group, right?
Right.
Well, license it.
Or none died in at least the group getting the injection, right? That you think that would be like a gold standard for maybe we don't put this out there.
21 died in the vaccinated group, 17 died in the placebo group. So we sued the FDA to get all the documents underlying the licensure of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine. Initially, they wanted 75 years, maybe seen that in the news or whatever. And a federal judge ordered them to produce it far quicker. In any event, those are the numbers. That's the differential, 21 to 17. So you'd say, whoa, well, they shouldn't have licensed that product. Except what the FDA did is and this is the problem with regulatory agencies, is they said to Pfizer, you know what? We're going to let you explain away each death. We're going to let you inject your bias, which is exactly what you're not supposed to do in a clinical trial.
Bias is the opposite of an objective trial.
Which is why you do a statistical comparison.
What is that?
You statistically compare the rate between the group that got it and the group that doesn't. It's just how you avoid bias. You say, we're going to randomize everybody. We're going to blind the researchers so they don't know who got the vaccine and placebo. We're then going to, after a period of time, we're going to collect during that, all of the adverse events, everything. And then we're going to unblind the researchers. And now let's compare between the two groups. Let's see what was the rate. And so, like when those folks were dying, technically, the folks who were in the trial and the researchers shouldn't not have known the person that died, whether they got the vaccine or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. They're not supposed to know that. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be blinded. So you're supposed to do a statistical comparison because it's a new product. You don't know how it's going to affect the human body. The whole idea of a clinical trial is to do that statistical comparison between the groups. Mm-hmm. So with that, they said, no, we'll let you inject your bias and explain away each death. But you remember when they said it was 95% effective? Do you know what they based that on?
Absolutely manipulated assessment of how they each died.
The 95% effective was not about death.
Oh.
Because more people died in the vaccinated group.
Right.
So it wasn't about death. Was it about hospitalization? No. That's not what 95% effective meant. 95% effective was basically related to sniffles.
Sniffles?
Yeah, basically if you had some symptoms. So about 8 people tested positive.
For the sniffles?
With some symptoms in the vaccinated group. About 160 tested positive for COVID-19 with some symptoms in the placebo group. They said, 8 to 160 something. They did a statistical comparison. They said 95% effective. That's where that number comes from. That has nothing to do with severe outcomes, hospitalizations, or death. Now, here's a great, amazing part. When we got all of the underlying documents, remember this was a time when they told everybody in America to test, like every week, and they were giving out free tests. So you would think in the clinical trial, 30,000 people, they would have just tested everybody every week. They didn't do that. They only
people that didn't get it, they had to go into work, they had to go through a protocol to do it like every day.
Yeah, every day. They only tested.
I think they bruised my brain a couple times.
Oh, geez. They didn't test everybody who had symptoms, and they only tested in a way that it was very mercurial. Okay? So of the thousands of people that had symptoms, this is what they based it on, was 8 and the 160 something. Think about that. So death is binary. It's hard to muck that up. You're dead or you're alive. They had all the deaths. They knew the number, but they didn't do a statistical comparison with death. To get to 95% effectiveness, if you were going to look under the hood, you really should have looked under the hood. But no, they did a statistical analysis because I would say the results fit the dogma. In any event, I got a little far afield from your
it's all very
mortality
interesting.
Point.
Do you think that Fauci should be in prison?
I think that if Fauci has broken laws, he should be in prison. And I think that the DOJ should prosecute any violation of law that they believe he's engaged in. That's something for Pam Bondi to decide. And we'll see if she goes down that road.
I mean,
she's probably the only one that could do it.
Like, who came up with all those ridiculous, nonsensical rules? Like, right, the COVID doesn't live at, like, the 4 foot level here at dinner, but it does at the 6 foot level, or on the airplane. If you were eating, you could have, all like these are the ways that you're not actually doing anything. This is completely nonsensical, and so few people understood that.
I'm not sure
6 foot rule,
but putting Fauci in prison doesn't solve the problem that letting public health officials
right?
make decisions that take away our rights. That doesn't solve that problem.
Right.
We solve the problem by saying that's a problem
Yeah.
and not letting them do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way we do it. It goes back to your comment earlier. Nobody's rights should ever be contingent on what some unelected bureaucrat in some health department says.
Is there any way to get this to sort of trickle down to being more about state laws, rights, and rules, so it's not quite so big government, federal level? Is there a way to kind of break things down on a state level a little bit more to grab the reins of some of this stuff?
Most mandates around medical products are at the state level, actually. I mean, during COVID, it didn't feel to look that way, because the federal government had the OSHA mandate for employers with 100 or more that got struck down by the Supreme Court. They had a whole bunch of other mandates, right? Which we brought lawsuits on all of those.
Mm-hmm.
But it is mostly at the state level, which is why most of the work that I do to protect civil and individual rights with regard to mandated medicine does happen at the state level.
I mean, that's really where you got a very big indication of the power of the state, I feel like, was during COVID, because you were like happy to either be living in Arizona where you could go golf every day, or you were miserable in California where you couldn't even go for a hike. Like, you got to realize, oh, wow. Or, DeSantis in Florida and all these new states that were getting a major influx of people moving to them because they had some more freedom. I feel like that was a really good example of what the power of a state could be. Do you think they should still be able to do more? I
do think that health policy, to the extent there's going to be, should be at the state level. The government really, the federal government in particular, should be completely out of this business. I mean, I think they should be out of the business of vaccines entirely. It's incredibly corrupting. The liability should be put back on industry. They should be held accountable. They should be responsible for safety. The moment the government comes out and tells you a product is safe and effective, when they go out and they promote it, think about how incredibly conflicting that is. They will then often use the tools that they have to get the result they want. And what are those tools? What are the tools of government? They're coercion. They're withholding rights, withholding benefits. They really still can't get it. They mandate you. If they still can't get it, they censor you. That's what happens. It's destructive to civil and individual rights. Government should not be in the business of promoting medical products. Was
there a point in time, I mean, before 1986, were they out of the loop? Is that where they got engaged in taking on sort of this regulatory role, or have they always been there? And like, what's been the vaccine arc? Because we got, things that had happened in the past with polio and all kinds of different things that were bad, right? I'm trying to think, there was pictures of the last time that we had like a massive pandemic and a lot of people did die. At what point in time did vaccines get introduced, and what's been that arc to where we are now?
In terms of the government's involvement, I mean, I think that there's always been some involvement, but 1986 was definitely an inflection point. Leading up to 1986, there were only 3 routine vaccines: MMR, DTP, and OPV. That's it. That's all there was. And the uptake, in the early 80s was about 60% for each of those, 50 to 60%. So only 50 to 60% of folks took those products. Those were the 3 routine. A child following the CDC schedule in 1986. Guess how many injections they got?
All I'm going to say is thank God, because I was born in 1982. So about 3 back then. Right?
Okay, yeah, good job.
Yeah,
3.
Yeah.
3 injections. Yeah. A child following the CDC schedule today, including in utero, will get 29 injections, including on the first day, by their first birthday. 29. So we've gone from 3 to 29. So first, there weren't that many vaccines back then to begin with. The uptake wasn't anywhere near the 90-something% they say
it is now.
Must have. And leading up to 1986, the 3 vaccines that did exist were causing so much harm and injury that each manufacturer stopped making it. We were down from 6 makers of companies making measles down to 1, about 6 for pertussis to 1, and 3 for polio down to 1. Lots of industries face this kind of inflection point, right? When a car start blowing up because the gas tank's faulty, you make a better car. Plane falls out of the sky, make a better plane. Plane door flies off, make better plane door. Your home, building materials are causing cancer, change the formulation. Go down the list of products. I mean, you and I sitting in this room right now, we're surrounded in this room by probably 1,000 different products from 1,000 different companies. Literally, as you and I sit here. Every one of those companies, every single one can be sued if they, on the basis that had they made their products safer, we wouldn't have gotten injured. This light wouldn't have fallen on us. These products wouldn't have caused cancer. Go down. You can go down the list. Whatever this lining this cup, right? Whatever's in this in this water. So, there's only one product in America you cannot sue on the basis that had you made it safer, my kid wouldn't have died, my kid would have been injured, I wouldn't have died, I wouldn't have been injured. And that is vaccines. That is because in 1986, Congress made, and I think, the fatal decision. Instead of forcing them to do what every other company has to do at that crossroad, make a better, safer product.
Right. Well, then look at the floodgates.
Did the opposite.
So how do you get in?
It gave them immunity to liability.
How do you get in then? Because obviously now the floodgates are open because they're like, wow, we can do anything we want. So there's the first question is first part of this, how do you get in? How do you get, why are all these vaccines added? Why are all of these different chemicals and various different things that these babies get, how do they even get in there?
You mean how did the vaccines get on the schedule?
Yeah.
Well, you said it earlier how you were referencing how decisions get made in companies in some way, right? How do big corporations make decisions? If you go into a boardroom in America, are they doing it based on ethics? Are they doing it based on morality? They do it based on what's best for the bottom line. If you have a retirement account in America, don't you want the companies in your portfolio to make decisions based on what's most profitable? I mean, if you have a 401k, certainly Wall Street does, certainly the investors do, the boardroom does, the CEO does, the COO, who all have stock options. Everybody has an interest, actually, up and down the chain, for the most part, for a company to be profitable. And that's okay typically when it comes to safety, because if I sell sheetrock and my sheetrock hurts people, right, or I sell cars or I sell furniture and it causes harms, I'm going to lose money as a company. So I have a financial interest to assure product safety before it goes on the market and after it goes on the market. The only product that's been broken for are for vaccines. So you asked me, how could it happen? I think what you're saying to me is, how could we have products given to babies, injected into babies, that may not be safe, is what I think you're asking.
Yeah,
me.
It sounds like, yeah, exactly.
And that's because of the National Child Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, because it reversed the financial incentive. It's not evil, it's not a conspiracy, it's just basic economics. When you look at most clinical trials, for example, for drugs, they are multi-year placebo-controlled trials. Yeah. Most of them. Why? Because the company wants to know before they put a drug on the market whether it's going to cause widespread harm. Because if it does, they could lose money. So
are all these parents paying for this vaccine? I don't have kids, so I don't know how it all works. Do you pay for that vaccine? Oh yes, I'll take that MMR. I'll take that. Charge me for it. Somebody's got to pay for this, right? Is the hospital paying for it? Insurance paying for it? I mean, who's paying these big pharma companies for this? For the vaccines? Product. Yeah. So are we? Just to finish the last point, when it comes to childhood vaccines, though, unlike multi-year placebo-controlled trials, as laid out by the FDA documentation, as I did in Chapter 10, they're almost all licensed based on days or weeks, some maybe a few months of safety review after injection. They never have a placebo-controlled group, and they're often underpowered. So the safety is never validated before they're licensed. Why? And that's all FDA documentation. I know you can either trust the original sources or you can listen to the quote-unquote fact checkers. But the original sources from the FDA validate what I just said, and they're all cited in the book. And why do the pharma companies do that? Because they don't have the economic incentive To do a full trial. I mean, why?
Why do it?
It doesn't matter.
It's the opposite.
It doesn't
they
matter.
hurt themselves economically.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of who pays for the vaccines, so there's something called the Vaccines for Children's program. It's a federal government program that guarantees payments for the pharma companies for every dose of vaccine. So if somebody can't pay, they pay for it. That program pays, including through some state-related programs, about half of all vaccines in America are paid for by that program, by our federal tax dollars. Billions of dollars a year that go to the pharma companies. I believe it'd be about $8 billion this year going to go to the pharma companies just to pay them for vaccines.
Wow.
And then the other half is just paid by private insurance. So, but yeah, parents don't, I've never heard of a parent paying out of pocket for a
Right,
vaccine.
that's why I'm saying it. I don't feel like that's a line item, because if it was, there'd be a whole lot of different decisions made, I'm sure, just based on financial availability. Having kids is already a big enough decision, you know?
No, they're completely free.
So if
That's
you're
the wrong term. They're not free.
No, yeah, you're the
parents say
product.
they're the opposite of free.
No, I think
but
it's true that
parents don't ever have to pay to get it for their kids.
if something is free, you are the product. So what are they trying to accomplish? I think this is ultimately where I'm trying to get to, is like, what is there some...
Who's they? Pharma?
Pharma, yeah.
Oh, pharma's
are they
running
trying
a
to make you a
business.
lifelong customer by giving you certain diseases so that you have to keep buying other products from them? Get paid by the government, essentially, or at least half of it, and then you're a lifelong customer privately for the rest of the time, or through insurance?
Well, I think in the first instance, they're just trying to make money on selling the product. I mean, think about it. It's an amazing business model. Guaranteed market because of mandates. Free marketing, government promotes it. No liability because they don't have to pay for injuries. And the guaranteed payment. I mean, think about that business
Do they
model.
think it can actually, like, are there actually some of these vaccines, are there some worth it? Like, are there vaccines worth getting? Are there ones that you would say, for sure, you should get this?
I think that when it comes to vaccines, you should always look at each individual vaccine and look at them carefully because they are completely different. You know, when I think about making an informed decision about a vaccine, first I often start with, does the company stand behind their product? Isn't that what most people like, well, does the company stand behind it? Do they have a warranty? Do they, guarantee anything? I mean, that's...
You'd think it'd be a given.
That's the way
if
people...
they make it. But
if you went to a car maker and you went to a car dealership and you said, I want to see these cars, and the guy said, look, I'll show you the cars just so you know, we don't cover anything. You drive this off the lot, you're on your own immediately. So that's one place to start. I mean, seriously, I've got a form letter you can send a pharma company and asking them that to stand behind the product, that if my kid's injured, you will, stand behind your product and let me sue you for that injury.
I mean, if you've done enough research and study, you would feel pretty confident that perhaps there'd be an anomaly along the way, but it would basically be bulletproof, or you wouldn't want to put it out there, right? Like I wouldn't give someone my car to drive and be like, God, I know that left rear falls off all the time, but yeah, it's fine. I mean, it'll drive. You're good. Well,
think about how troubling this is too. Some vaccines have been out for decades, and they still don't know it's safe enough to lift the immunity. Hep B. It's been 40 years. You still don't know it's safe enough? You still need the immunity? So that's the first thing I'd look at. The second thing I would look at is going back to clinical trials because they're so important. It's the time.
Proper ones, though.
Proper ones.
Yes.
Or maybe it was improper, but you should know that. Meaning, what was the clinical trial relied upon to license this product? For the car, what is the crash test report show? I want to put my kid in this car. I want to know how safe it is. You look at, you're not going to, but you'd want to look at the clinical trial because that's the one time you get to prospectively look at it. You could pull the package insert. Anybody who has ever gotten a drug, there's a little piece of paper inside.
With microscopic writing?
Yeah, but you just get to section 6.1.
Oh, is this the one? Do I write that down? 6.1 is what you always want?
Section 6.1, and it will, as required by federal law, it has to summarize the clinical trial.
Oh, really?
Relied upon to license the product, and you can read it right there. It's often just a few paragraphs in summary. You can just it's not hard.
So any pamphlet that you get, any one-sheeter you get folded up, anything like that inside of a product, a drug product, you should be able to pull it out and go to 6.1. Give you the summary.
For almost all of them.
Wow.
Some of them where the package insert has not been updated in a very long time will have an older format.
Wow.
But that's uncommon. I've seen less and less of those. There are a few around, but for the most part, no. You just go to section 6.1. Yes, you don't know if you need to go read some tomb. You can go read section 6.1 and you could see what was it relied upon. So to continue with the Hep B example, so, hey, will you stand behind this Hep B vaccine? No? Okay, well, let me look at the clinical trial. And if you do, there are 2 licensed Hep B vaccines given to newborns. Recombavax HB and Engerix B. Recombavax HB was licensed based on a clinical trial. Before I say this, it's going to sound crazy. Nobody's believe it. And you should go to the FDA website. You should pull up the package insert, go to section 6.1, and you can see this yourself, okay? Because I wouldn't believe it if I didn't see it. It was licensed based on a clinical trial that had 147 kids, monitored safety for 5 days after injection with no control group. That's it. That clinical trial is laughable.
Oh, that sounds made up, to be honest. Actually,
it is.
Probably could.
It does sound. It isn't made up. It sounds made up, because if
like they could have just lied that happened. Essentially, is what I'm saying. Like,
if you said to me, "Come up with the craziest thing about it," I wouldn't have made that up.
No,
because I would never have dreamed that. Nobody would believe you.
Maybe that's why it is true, because it's that ridiculous, and that's fine. It's fine.
I'll tell you the ways I know it's true. Before we can, I'll tell you the ways I know it's true. 1, it's in the package insert section 6.1. Anybody can see it. 2, I deposed the world's leading vaccinologist, Dr. Stanley Plotkin, and I asked him specifically about that clinical trial. And he was like, well, and he seemed uncertain of how long it was. And he went to section 6.1. He said, yeah, 5 days of safety monitoring, 147 kids. Okay. I subpoenaed him after the deposition. Is there anything else beyond that? Anything. He never produced a single page. We then FOIA'd the FDA, Freedom of Information Act, for the underlying clinical trial reports. So we could see, come on, there's got to
be more.
There's got to be more. We have them. It's 5 days. You want to hear the craziest part about it? In the clinical trial reports, guess who is listed as the principal investigator for the childhood trial for that product? Dr. Stanley Plotkin. I didn't know it at the time when I deposed him.
Oh my God.
So I actually literally asked the man who did the trial. In a deposition about it. So there's nobody left to talk to. I mean, we've got the package insert. I deposed the guy who did the trial. I have the underlying FDA reports. They're all on ICanDecide.org's website. It's a nonprofit that supports a lot of this work. And so yes, that's what it is. So that would be the second place I'd look. Is the clinical. And you might say, look, they don't stand behind it. You could say, well, I don't like that clinical trial. Engerix be the other one, 4 days of safety monitoring after injection. And it only sounds crazy until you think through the economics of it. Mm-hmm. When you understand the economics, it starts making a lot more sense. So,
what's the definition of a vaccine?
You want my definition of vaccine?
Well, there should be just one.
Well, it's problematic.
This is kind of what I'm leading into.
I could tell you what it can't be, because then it wouldn't fit. Because the definition
It's so sad that this is the best we can do.
Well,
it should be just a definition.
Well, there is only one definition that works for all vaccines.
Okay.
It's not that it stops transmission, because most vaccines don't.
Mm-hmm.
Pertussis vaccine doesn't.
Okay.
Tetanus vaccine doesn't.
It stops the severity of it?
It reduces symptoms.
Okay.
So like pertussis vaccine will create immunity that will reduce symptoms, but it does not stop the bacteria from proliferating in your mucosal surfaces and your carriage and your nasopharynx. So you will have less symptoms, but you will have just as much carry, and you are probably more likely to spread it because you don't know to stay home in bed.
Bad.
Which is why the studies that look at interepidemic intervals, this is how you look at whether or not there's less circulating pathogen. The intervals start getting wider. Like measles vaccine can stop transmission of measles. So measles interepidemic intervals got wider and wider and wider and wider until we've mostly eliminated measles as a circulating pathogen in America. But pertussis, they've stayed the same or have kind of gotten a little shorter according to some studies. There probably might be even more circulating pathogen. So you can't define vaccine based on whether it stops transmission. Most of them actually don't. You can't define it based on like a particular technology, because Hep B vaccines are recombinant DNA technology. Tetanus is like a toxoid vaccine. You have attenuated vaccines. You have different forms of subunit vaccines. You have mRNA vaccines. They're all different technologies.
So there are multiple mRNA vaccines?
Well, there's obviously the COVID vaccine, but there aren't Does that mean a recombinant DNA vaccine is not a vaccine? So are Hep B vaccines? Well, then they said, well, the difference is that with the recombinant, they said, well, the recombinant, with the mRNA, it was forcing your cells to produce the spike that then your body picked up to create immunity because that step, whereas other vaccines, you inject them and they got a whole host of constituent parts. But there was also a cascade of events in each instance that before you end up with basically something, an antigen being carried to your lymph nodes to find a correlate naive B cell to create antibodies. So we could define that in different ways. My definition is this. My definition is that it's a product that causes a level of harm that it cannot exist without federal government immunity to prevent people from swimming injuries. I'm serious. That is the only commonality.
Within all of the vaccines.
That's right. That's it. It's the only commonality. It is. It's the only thing that's common amongst the vaccines, genuinely. And I'm not trying to be cute about it. I'm serious.
Say it again. I laughed too early to
Yeah, no,
say it again.
It's the only it's a product that causes such a level of harm that it cannot exist without the federal government giving immunity to liability for the injuries that it causes. And that actually is real immunity. That immunity is really good, unlike the actual immunity claim the products create.
Yeah, exactly.
In any event, to me, that's what a vaccine is.
I'm just wondering if the whole dismantling of vaccine as a category in and of itself is something that is problematic in nature. You gave your definition of what a vaccine was, which is essentially not really saying, you're describing the scenario more than anything, I feel like, as opposed to it stops the spread, it stops the severity to some degree or whatever, and it just seems like, well, then I go to the whole COVID-19 vaccine thing and I'm like, the whole thing was it's not really a vaccine. What was it? Was it?
Well, why do you say it was not a vaccine?
Well, because we can't even define it. Because it was a different technology. Because it was a different technology than we've really been experiencing when it comes to vaccines. Is that accurate?
I mean, sure, but so are the technologies for all kinds of vaccines.
So they all change.
They're all different. I mean, when the first Hep B vaccine was licensed in 1986 with recombinant DNA technology, it was hailed as a marvel. Go back and read the papers from then. mRNA has been hailed as a marvel now. There was all kinds of controversy, and there were reports of death after it and all kinds of stuff. In the same way, people look at mRNA vaccines today and they're like, well, that's a totally new technology. Recombinant DNA technology is completely different than anything that preceded it in terms of developing a vaccine. The only difference is, the only commonality is it went through the biologics division of the FDA and was labeled a vaccine, in my view.
Why the hell did you get into vaccines at all?
Why did I get into them? I'll tell you the very first thing I ever learned about vaccines. It was a long time ago. I was working at actually the former firm I used to work at before I started my own law firm about, I think, 14 years ago now. And I was sent a packet of information about vaccines that included medical information as well as some stuff about the 1986 Act that we talked about earlier. I didn't understand anything about the medical stuff. I knew nothing about immunology, vaccinology, infectious disease, pediatrics back then, or any of that. My office is filled with those medical textbooks now. I mean, that's actually most of my, because I have to depose these experts.
Rolls off the tongue really fast for you now.
The law stuff that's the easy part. I got to learn all the science stuff. And then so in any event, and some genetics, because some vaccines involve genetics. But hopefully, luckily I don't have to do too much of that. But when I saw,
I might like gene editing, if that's what you're referring to. I think that's a fun new avenue, fun new area.
Oh, yeah. As long as you can sue them for hurting people and the government's not involved, I'm great with all of it. I'm all good with all of it. I'm not, and look, I'm not pro or against any vaccine. I'm not anti. I don't think they're good or bad. They're just a product.
Yeah. You're pro-rights.
They're just a product.
Pro-rights and information.
I don't have feelings about products.
Yeah.
They're just products. So when I saw the 86 Act, that I understood intuitively. I was like, what?
Right.
What? The product they tell you is completely safe and you inject over and over into healthy babies, you can't sue the company that makes it on the basis that they could have made the product. That just seemed...
That's unethical.
Incredible to me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't understand, again, anything about medicine, but I understood how big corporate America works. I mean, you know, I'd worked at one of the biggest firms in the country, representing huge publicly traded corporations and bet the company litigation, multi-billion-dollar disputes. It's actually what I kept doing for a while after I left. When I opened my own practice, I did commercial, continued to do it for a few years, just a smaller scale instead of like $1 billion. It was like a few hundred million or tens of millions of disputes. But that I just found shocked. That was the first piece of information that I ever came across, and it was really dumbfounding.
And how did that actually happen? Like, how did that act get put through?
The way the law came about was, like I said, those three manufacturers, one left each for, each of those three routine vaccines. They should have just let them go make a better, safer product. I mean, it's not like they don't have a big enough market.
Yeah.
Think about drugs that are sold for a very small group of sick people and have a lot of adverse events, and pharma companies can make money on those, right? Because you just make them as safe as you can technologically and you disclose the risks. You do those two things, you can typically protect yourself. Congress decided to go this different route, and it was a combination, I think, of a few factors, but that was a major one. It was a huge mistake. It was a huge mistake.
So they were trying to let these companies off for the damage that was being done because so many businesses were going out of business, essentially, because of the safety and efficacy of them.
The safety.
Safety.
It was a safety issue in particular. People are getting power, people are having issues. And look, there's two primary ways you can hold a pharma company accountable, okay? You can sue for drugs, okay? This immunity does not apply for drugs. The first way is something called a design defect claim, is suing on the basis that you could have made it safer. Had you spent one more penny and put this stopper on the gas tank to the car, it wouldn't have blown up and these folks wouldn't have died. If you spent one penny and put a plastic shield on this saw, I'd have my finger today, okay? Right? Basic, clearly technology advanced, you could have done it. That's the primary way you hold a product manufacturer accountable for an injury. So, and then the second way is failure to warn. You didn't warn me about the risk, okay? So
it's like black box warning kind of stuff.
Right, so if I make a drug and I make it as safe as technologically feasible and I disclose the risks, and as long as I don't go engage in fraud or something, that limits liability, which is why, like I said, drugs for limited populations with a lot of adverse events can survive.
Is that why you see those commercials for drug companies that basically list like, oh, there was a symptom last night I was listening and I was like, what? Oh, drooling.
Drooling?
I was like, da-da-da-da-da, may cause drooling. I was like,
that doesn't sound good. Maybe that was a way to say like some kind of palsy in the mouth, but...
You'd be thinking that way. I'd be thinking that out of it, or the drug is that like potent.
Yeah.
Drooling.
It's doing something
I mean,
bad.
of course, I don't remember the name because they all have names that are like not memorable, probably for a good reason.
Maybe. But they, on the commercials, that's the ads themselves can't be misleading, but they are not typically disclosing the full panoply of potential adverse events. That is often in section 6.2 of the package insert.
Oh, that's
right?
good to know too.
So they're usually there, and you
that's
can
the
go,
full spectrum of.
Those are the ones the company is disclosing as they have a basis to believe are causally related. Now, a lot of times what you'll hear, not to get too off track off your question, but a lot of times you'll hear, well, they just throw in that document, anything that could be related. That's not what the federal regulations require. They provide that the company is only to include in section 6.2. Remember, 6.1 was the clinical trial.
A summary.
6.2 is supposed to only include the adverse events that the company has a basis to believe are causally, not correlation, causally related to the product.
Wow.
Now, that's not what you typically hear,
Right.
but you can go look up the federal regulations, and that's what the regulation provides. And with drugs, I do think they are quicker to put it into Section 6.2 because they don't want to be sued. Oh, it's in there. I disclosed it to you. I disclosed it. But with vaccines, I don't think they worry too much. They put stuff in there, but they don't have to worry too much.
Who pays for the research that is put out in 6.1 and 6.2?
Well, in 6.1, the clinical trials are conducted by the company seeking licensure. So Pfizer conducts the clinical trial for the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine.
My car's safe to drive, promise.
Right. Which is another reason why you want to be able to hold them accountable, because they're trialing. Yeah, the FDA doesn't do the trial. There's no independent organization. The company itself does the trial, and then they submit the data after they've curated it to the FDA. This again goes back to why economic interest is so. I can't state it strongly enough. That is why the 86 Act has been destructive. It has removed the way we assure products are safer. You think your car is safer because of the federal government? No way. I'll prove it to you. Look at countries that have incredible amounts of regulations, like USSR, where you couldn't bring civil suits. How safe are their products? It's not the government that makes products safer. It's the economic self-interest of the company to want to make it safe because they don't want to lose money.
Yeah.
It's not even the lawyers that are doing it. I mean, if it goes long enough, they'll have, the lawyers get involved, and there'll be a class action. But it's that's what drives it. I mean, that's why it's really problematic. I'll give you one other data point to chew on, okay? And which is, in the early 1980s, we had about 10% of kids in America, according to studies, under 10% had a chronic health condition. Today, over 40% of kids in America, and by some estimates, 50 or even more, have a chronic health condition.
Yeah.
Often multiple. What are those chronic health conditions that have exploded since the early 80s?
Oh, I mean, sometimes they're a little bit more, they seem like they're a little bit more affect, or non-affect, but like anxiety, depression. A hormone disruption, I'm sure, thyroid disorder. I would think that it's probably hormonal and
most of the ones that have exploded are
psychological on some level.
So neurological.
Neurological, yes.
So most of them have exploded are neurological, immunological, or immune-mediated neurological disorders.
Yeah.
Most of them. So you think of asthma, that's an immune system dysfunction. When you think of atopic issues, when you think of even ADHD, for example.
Right.
ADHD is an immune system disorder, according to most studies.
Wow.
Yes. A lot of these neurological issues that some of which you just went through, have an etiology in the PubMed literature that relates to some form of immune system dysregulation. People don't think of ADHD, for example.
Right.
Because it's the one,
I
use that as an example because it's the one you're like, really? What does that have to do with the immune system?
Yeah.
But it has an etiology, according to a whole line of studies, in some form of immune system dysregulation. So do other neurological issues. Your immune system and your nervous system are intertwined. They're really intertwined. You think of the blood-brain barrier, right? For example. Okay, but do you ever think of how you have lymphatic pathways that go into your brain?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I dealt with that with my own health issues with my implants, my breast implants that I had out. I still do lymphatic work just to keep my, I understand the value of that.
And
inflammation.
Because you had toxicity.
Oh my God, I had systemic inflammation.
And how did it get around your body? Not in your blood necessarily. It went through your lymph system. Because it doesn't have the same type of
my
filters.
lymph nodes right here were swollen so badly by the end that it looked like I didn't have a jaw for like years.
And that came from toxicity in a different part of your body.
Yeah.
So, and people don't think of it that way, but while you have the blood-brain barrier but when you think about your lymph vessels, when you have immune cells going into your brain, macrophages and dendritic cells and so forth, what they're carrying in their package doesn't go through there's no border patrol in the same way, right? There's no, there isn't the same type of filtration going on. So
Yeah.
things can get into your brain, things get into your organs and deposit, right, in ways. So I'm not saying, by the way, that vaccines caused all of that increase in chronic health issues. But if you're going to, rule out what's caused them, because go talk to the CDC, go look, they can't tell you what's causing it. They keep saying they don't know. They also don't look at the things that probably are likely culprits. The studies that have looked at kids that have no vaccines, to kids that have one or more, and there's a whole line of them, are consistent.
Well, the autism one's the perfect example as far as the Amish versus the general public. There's literally none. I think they said there was 2, but they were people that did not start in the Amish community and were vaccinated. Like
Right.
there's 0.
Right. That's one example. I represent the Amish community.
Oh, wow.
in a case, and I can tell you that
So that's accurate?
there's I do not see the chronic health issues. We have a case pending right now where the families at issue in total have over 160 children. Amongst those 160 plus children, they don't have any of the chronic issues. None. So you would expect, if they were the typical demographic of American children, about 1 in 9, 10 would have asthma. So you should have at least 116 cases of asthma. You have none. Go down the list, and we actually detailed this with expert reports in our case. So you've got, but that's one example. But then you have other examples. You have studies of homeschoolers. There's one study of homeschoolers. It was a small retrospective study that was based on surveys that found 4, 5, 6 times the rate of these chronic health issues amongst the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. This same researcher also recently got access to the records of about 50,000 kids in the Medicaid program in Florida and did a comparative study and found, again, a statistically significant increased risk of neurological disorders amongst vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. This same group also, on the homeschooler one, found that I think it was 32% of premature infants that were vaccinated had a neurodevelopmental disorder, neurological disorder, versus 0% of the premature infants who did not get any vaccines. Fascinating finding. There was also a study of 3 pediatric practices where they looked at the vaccinated and unvaccinated because they happen to have a lot of unvaccinated kids. Again, same kind of outcomes. And there's another study out there that looked, there's a whole series of these studies. They're pretty consistent. Now, most of them are not of the, I would say, because they have to work within the budgets they have, but they're consistent. And to be clear, vaccines are not the only environmental insult that can cause harms. There are many, many other toxicities that folks come into contact with.
Well, it kind of seems like that's what we're really facing as humanity's facing a body burden that just can't handle any one thing anymore, because we have so many going on, whether it's the air we breathe or the food we eat or the way that the chemicals added or the way that it's stored or the way that it's put in the grocery store for it, wrapped in plastic, or you name it. It's just constant exposure. And then you put on top of that all of the different devices now with EMFs and frequencies that are flying around, and incandescent to LED that send off light waves that are super high, super odd frequency. How do we survive this?
I would say you want to try to limit your exposure to toxic chemicals. That includes not only the ones in medical products, but also PFAS, forever chemicals, various plastics and so forth that are hormone disruptors. Obesity is a huge problem. Obesity amongst kids. We know that can result in health issues. And obviously there are folks working on all of those. What I focus on are these particular products, but I don't focus on them from a safety perspective in the same way. Focus on them individual civil rights. But from a safety perspective, if you want to address the exploding rates of immune and immune-mediated disorders in this country, you need to rule out vaccines as the cause, or because the studies so far, the ones that have all been published, point to it as the culprit.
Was there anything in your deep, wide exploration of the vaccine category that is a very powerful part of why we are where we are today, that you can't include in things like a book or in court or any of these things, that in your bones, like, this is stuff I wish I could use as ammunition against the government or against these big pharma companies that doesn't quite have the proof, let's say, to be able to say it? Like, is there anything that you found that you're like, I would love to include this, but I don't have enough to back it up. I just know it's true.
Well, I would, I'll answer it this way. I hear a lot of speculation about things relating to vaccines, and what my often response is, look, it's an interesting point, and that evidence might appear to support it, but why go there? Why go anywhere speculative with these products whatsoever when the uncontroversial and uncontrovertible facts about how they were licensed and what their post-licensure safety looks like
it's
is
so bad
so
anyway.
Damning.
Yeah.
And requires
like, you don't even need
no
to dig.
speculation. Not only do I need to dig, I don't need to go beyond the CDC and the FDA website, their underlying mortality data, the clinical trial reports, and the post-licensure safety reports that they have paid for. Nobody looks at them. The irony is that they make claims about these things, but the primary sources don't lie. The experts do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the primary sources don't lie. Mm. And that is what I rely upon.
What are the three biggest things that you think could change that would put people in a much more safe and powerful position to make good decisions for themselves?
About these products?
About it all. Like, would it be taking away the 1986 Act so that was like, what would be those? I would imagine that's one of them, which is why I need more, because I feel like that's just kind of a given that needs to be reversed.
Restore normal market forces on the companies, just like what you said. Get rid of all immunity. Let them have to defend their own products. That's number one. Number two, get government out of the business of these products entirely. If they want to play a role as regulators, fine, but be regulators. Don't be promoters, marketers, advocates, defenders.
Right.
That's literally their role.
This is where like a good government contract could come in. These outsourcing through different companies, third-party companies that could go ahead and actually test these products instead of just being given a one sheet with 147 kids that got watched for 5 days. Like, that's crap.
What I would argue, you wouldn't need that. If you removed liability, trust me.
Right then and there.
That would fix it in overnight. Overnight, it would fix it. You think they would keep a product on the market if they think the harms are going to be excessive?
It'd be so fascinating to wonder how many would be taken away, like right away, so that they weren't sued.
I think that they would be here's the way I think it would play out in the real world, okay? And I see this from other drug products. So, for example, the GLP-1s out there, like Ozempic and so forth. The harms they were causing, were trickling into plaintiffs' firms around the country, right? So, I mean, you want to know what harms a drug causes? Let me start with plaintiffs' firms.
Start with the lawyer.
Start with the lawyer. I'm serious. Start with lawyers.
Exactly.
And as those plaintiffs' lawyers are accumulating those cases, okay, the company is often, I believe, putting aside money in a kitty to pay for the harms. So it's not like if the product they find out afterwards causes a harm, they just take it off the market immediately. It depends on the harm. They do a calculation. There's a risk benefit. It's economics.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not about suffering. It's not about life years lost. It's not about what people would like to think that math looks like. It's about what will we have to pay and when. So, as you know, there are already lawsuits that have now started with these GLP-1s. They'll all get consolidated. They'll be in a multi-district litigation. It'll go on for a long time, probably until the companies, basically until they can't anymore. And at that point, they'll have I'm sure they've done their math. They'll have made this much, and they'll pay out that much.
Exactly, and they go win.
And that's it, and they win this much. And
exactly.
so to answer your question about vaccines, I think it's the same calculus. It's not like I think they'll immediately they're not going to immediately pull them. But what will happen is the cases will start accumulating. The immunity will drop. It's not like you can go backwards typically, unless they do that. I doubt it. First of all, I don't see the immunity ever going away. Pharma's got over 1,000 lobbyists.
Yeah.
You know how many vaccine injury lobbyists there are?
Oh my God. Right. That's right.
That's
why I was even asking about, like, maybe the word vaccines just needs to be redefined, right? And then it implies a change within the regulations as far as vaccines being able to get through without any sort of financial implications.
Well, there is a way to get rid of the immunity without Congress. You don't have to change the definition of vaccine, whatever that is.
Right.
But under the 1986 Act, the vaccine does need to be routinely recommended, amongst two other requirements. So it has to be a routine recommended vaccine. You might have recalled Secretary Kennedy recently announced not that long ago that COVID vaccine is no longer routinely recommended.
Right.
On the childhood schedule.
Right.
So when you pull up the childhood schedule, the CDC childhood schedule, the COVID vaccine's in blue. It's not in yellow. That means it's not routine. It cannot get 1986 Act immunity.
Wow.
It has PrEP Act immunity.
Okay.
Which is why probably they'll never take that away. But it can't have it. So if you took the other vaccines, and it'll be a litigated issue, and you made them non-routine,
then they're out.
They would be out.
Wow, that's a great one.
And you know who can do that? The CDC director with the stroke of a pen.
I mean, you worked with Bobby for how long?
Nearly a decade.
I mean, how big is it of a deal that he is in the position he's in with HHS, and how much can he really get done?
It's a huge deal. I mean, the news seems to think so. It's an incredible opportunity. It's obviously what he is. And he has fought to try and protect children for decades, first as an environmental attorney, then fighting on this issue. And, as Bobby will tell you, every morning he wakes up and he prays that God will use him as a vessel to save children. That's what he asks for. That's just what he will tell you. And I think that in some ways this is an answer to his prayers. In terms of what he could get done, it's tough. He's got 65,000 career employees below him. The closer they are to the vaccine issue, and I say this based again on looking on internal emails, millions of internal documents that we have, the more zealot they are with regards to these products. They don't think about them, they believe in them. It's part of the problem. So you've got that. He's got to fight that entire machinery below him. In HHS, across HHS, there are maybe 200 political appointees, and even then he doesn't get to pick. The White House has to approve them. So it's not necessarily that he gets who he wants in there. And that goes the meaning involved with the White House machinery, which doesn't mean Trump doesn't sit there and make all the decisions.
Sure.
There are other folks in there.
You could see when Trump would talk about Bobby being in the position that he's in, he's like, yeah, he's got some great ideas, and some I don't know, and you can feel almost like there's still that sort of very integrated big pharma role with all kinds of things that, are visible or invisible.
There's a lot of people with different ideas.
Yeah.
And some of them are in the White House.
Yeah, and it's about, I'm sure it's a big ship to turn. It's a lot of it's pretty far gone, and it's sometimes it's probably about seeing how much you can get done overall versus in one single vertical. But it does seem like this is a big deal that he's in the position he's in because he's just such a different thinker. It's
obviously making them go crazy.
Yeah.
It's making the believers go crazy.
Yeah. Well, I think that's that's a perfect little way to wrap it up with the exact name of your title, which I think actually is I'm finishing it with it. I hope everybody is still paying attention because I think this is ultimately a fundamental, it's like an emotional orientation within your life for various different things. And this, of course, you're specifically trying to point out the fact that vaccines have been looked at from a belief standpoint and in an almost like a religious way. I just have faith in them. You blindly believe that this is safe for me and I should take it and I don't ask any questions, right? Did Jesus rise from the dead after 3? You don't question these things, right? This is how it happened. So I'd love for you to just kind of explain how people should be essentially looking at vaccines total way as opposed to the way that so many people do right now, which is much more in a belief way.
Let's just look at them as products. because that's what they are. And they should treat them like products, like we talked about earlier. Would you put your kid in a car without looking at the crash test report before you bought one? You should just treat them as products. And you know who the vaccine believers are, because when you confront them with any kind of data or information or logic, they just get angry, they get upset, because they can't draw from their intellect. They often never looked at the primary sources. They draw from their emotions. And I call it a religion, but it is different than a typical religion. Because in most religions, as you just pointed out, you're in a religion. You're engaged in a leap of faith.
That's a funny distinction, yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Where do we go after we die?
Right.
Religion is there often to answer the unanswerable. And you're engaged in a leap of faith. You're believing, right? Something you cannot prove.
Mm-hmm.
These folks, they don't think they're in a religion. They think they're science-based. We are science-based. We are data-driven. But when you confront them with the actual data, they don't respond to you intellectually. They respond to you with, I have to destroy you. I have to censor you. You are bad. They have to dehumanize you, right? That is what you get in response, instead of engaging with you, whether it's scientifically or intellectually or logically and so forth. And that's why I call it, it really is a religion on their part.
Well, you're about to scare the living shit out of them, because once you understand the dangers, they have to now put that into their mind as a possibility, and nobody wants to hear that stuff.
No,
I don't want to tell my friends that got vaccinated any of the crap I heard, especially in the early years when things were happening with COVID, of like, oh my God, this could happen. Like, I don't even talk about that, because I do have a fear that people that got vaccinated, that there's going to be repercussions for almost all of them. But you don't want to talk about that because it's done. Right? And these people that have already gone there, they don't want to think about that. Ignorance is bliss until you die of sudden death.
Yeah, I mean, folks who got the COVID vaccine, absolutely. You don't want to think about it. And the hardest part of it is that you did it to yourself. And you know what makes it even worse? Because you're talking about folks who got the vaccine, your friends who are adults who got the vaccine. Think about how devastating it is to the parent who looks at their child who's been injured by a vaccine. And so many of them, when it happens, who do they blame? They often blame themselves, because they say, I did this to my kid. I should have looked better. I should have researched it. I should have, researched it better. And a lot of people say to me, well, if vaccines cause harm, I'd know it. I'm always like, why? Do you know what drugs just came off the market? Because they come off the market all the time. And
No.
do you know what harms they caused? Do you? Tell me them. Tell me the last 3 drugs that came off the market, what harms they caused. Of course you don't know. You know why you don't know? Because it didn't happen to you, and you should be grateful. Or you don't know what happened to you. So it's the same thing for the families. It is scary when you think about it, because if we don't properly make sure that we're addressing this problem, we're at 40+% chronic disease. What's the next stop? How much worse does it get? What will be the sequel from
collapse?
I mean,
like a human collapse. We're already not reproducing enough children right now to sustain, keep the planet going, according to some.
Not only that.
And I'm totally failing. I think I'm supposed to be at 2.1 or 2, and I'm at 0.
Okay, well.
So thanks for your 4.
Yeah,
and my sister's 4.
I'll drop them off. Yes.
I'll give them driving lessons.
And when you think about all the ones who need lifetime care for a number of these issues, then you have a whole segment of society that needs to be responsible for taking care of those folks. Yeah. And the cost has been calculated just for some of these to be in the trillions. Our whole national budget is right now like $6 trillion, and that's not even, we're not even paying for all that. We're at $7 trillion actually. I mean, we are going to not only is there human suffering, not only is there readiness, not only is there having enough people out there who function, we are going to actually, it's existential from an economic perspective as well, just to put it in cold terms. Yeah. It's really sad. Adults can talk. They can say what happened to them. Babies can't. All they can do is scream. And screaming is a very common reaction after vaccination. High-pitched screaming when you think about it. So it's, and we don't vaccinate 270 million people all at once typically. So it's really hard to hide the issues from COVID-19 vaccine. That's another differential too. They are all different. They do have different safety profiles. But for COVID vaccine, that really made it hard.
I mean, they tried hard to hide that DeMar Hamlin moment on the football field, but I think a lot of us were like, Or LeBron's son, right? Didn't LeBron's son have a problem? I mean, like, we're talking about these, like, elite athletes that are having these almost near-death moments.
If the COVID vaccine was rolled out like a typical child vaccine, and you vaccinated a small cohort of children every single year, so after 20 years, you're finally getting to a higher percentage of the population. Myocarditis, pericarditis amongst children would start to rise slowly over that 20-year period, okay? And they'd be like, we don't know what's causing it, because it would recede into the background rate, which is why most of the vaccine issues often that they will accept are the ones where it's really hard to ignore.
Yeah.
Like, remember when thrombosis with thrombocytopenia, they had decreased platelets, right, with blood clotting. So usually when you have more platelets, you have blood clotting, but they had reduced platelets, increased blood clotting. That doesn't happen normally. That's not normal. It's not normal to have less platelets, which are which clot in your blood, and more clotting. So they were going in, and what the hospitals were doing, they were giving them something to reduce the platelet counts, and it was killing them, right? This was right. So this is from the J&J vaccine, right? This condition, and so they couldn't ignore that one. That was it happened immediately. It was no differential. But things like, chronic health conditions, things like myopericarditis would normally, and they're still trying to hide it a bit, recede into the background rate because it happens otherwise. That stuff gets hidden.
You know what then? Maybe this has two meanings.
Okay.
It's not only like, let's not have this be sort of a belief system like religion can be, but also maybe this is exactly what we needed. Like vaccines, amen. We got one in such an aggressive, massively implemented way very quickly that is now, instead of being a slow bleed to to a place where it's hard to point your finger at the causation, maybe now that's literally pulled the veil back in the most aggressive way, and we're going to finally get to the bottom of it, because this stuff has been going on too long but too slowly. And you know what? Maybe, amen. Now we see it. Now we see it.
Yeah.
So be it, right? Amen means so be it.
Yeah, it took implementing a program on the adults, I think, to actually turn the corner.
Yeah.
For people to actually recognize the overreach.
Amen.
Amen.
That was like the best ending to a podcast ever. Like the hardest landing. Love that. Thanks everybody for listening to the Pretty Intense podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard today and you want to hear more, please click on the subscribe button.